Canada is promising to spend big if businesses will only invest in new green technologies. But from carbon capture to hydrogen, we're also making some big bets on the direction of those technologies. Is that a mistake? Michael Bernstein is Executive Director of Clean Prosperity. Thanks for being with us.
Good to be here.
So there's a big sense, of course, that the green investments in this budget sort of pivoted a little bit from previous efforts on this front to respond to what the U.S. is doing and offer a whole bunch of incentives to get businesses to invest here. And I understand there was a feeling of competitiveness with the U.S. But does it take us off track, Michael, to do these kind of tax credits and subsidies and really make bets on specific technologies?
Well, I think the most important thing would be to try to offer a broad-based signal across the entire economy by making our current carbon pricing system work more effectively. And you did actually see a nod to that in the budget through a program called Contracts for Difference, which essentially provides insurance to businesses that the carbon markets in Canada are going to work effectively for the long term. So that's really the key. But because of what our competitors down south have done with the Inflation Reduction Act, it was important for us to respond. And I think yesterday's, or rather Tuesday's budget went part of the way to closing the gap in some of those key technologies, and I think that was a good thing.
So obviously Canada faces a bit of an existential problem, and that is because not only do we rely heavily on fossil fuels in terms of how we live our lives, but it's also a huge source of revenue in this country and jobs and prosperity. So we need to do a pivot on both fronts. Are we going down the right path to actually have in place new technologies, new industries that will replace that lost revenue, income, jobs, everything that we get from fossil fuels right now?
Well, we need both, right? We need an all of the above approach. We know that Canada's objectives are multiple. They're to reduce emissions, of course, but they're also to attract investment and to grow our economy. And they're to help the world, especially the Western world, achieve energy security in the short run. So it makes all the sense in the world to me that we would be supporting all of our industries, traditional energy sources, new renewable sources of energy, and other kinds of low carbon technology. And I think you see the budget trying to do that. So I think that really is an appropriate balanced approach.
So I guess on that line that you're describing there is where carbon capture and storage comes in. Oil and gas likes it because it lets them continue to operate while dealing with their emissions problem. Critics would say, Michael, it doesn't work. It doesn't work at scale. We've never seen it really at scale, but that there's a concern we're putting billions of dollars into a technology that extends the life of an industry that eventually we have to do without. What would you say to that?
Well, the first thing I think is really important here is that carbon capture technology is about a lot more than the oil and gas sector. It's going to be critical for the cement sector, for pulp and paper, for certain forms of hydrogen production, and a lot more. So carbon capture is a needed technology for many different reasons. To the people who say it doesn't work, I've always found that really confusing because, we capture over 35 million tons of carbon globally this year, and we've done it every year for decades now. So it's clear that it works. The question is it the best solution and the lowest cost solution for a specific facility? And that's going to depend on a case-by-case basis.
All right, we've got to leave it there, Michael, but it's great to have your thoughts on this. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Michael Bernstein is Executive Director of Clean Prosperity. Time for the takeaway, and when it's time to take interest. Our federal government is once again servicing the public by running a massive deficit. But unlike the deficits of recent years, it's different this time. A deficit is a pretty simple matter. It means the government is spending more in the current period than it is collecting in revenue. And just like a business or a household, the only way to finance that gap in income is with a loan. In other words, deficits can be seen as a signal that something has gone off the rails. Either the spending was too high or the amount collected in taxes was too low. Every now and then, governments have an emergency, like a global pandemic, and might fall into deficit. But ideally, they would then work to get out of it as soon as possible, not unlike paying down your credit card debt as fast as you can. Instead, not only are we not paying it down, we are borrowing to pay for it. This year, the government will have to borrow $421 billion from global markets, and a full 85% of that is to refinance debt that is maturing. Revolving credit, in other words. And since interest rates have risen, that debt will be more expensive than it was before. That adds up to a meaningful number. This year alone, the government will spend almost $44 billion on interest. That makes interest payments on debt about the second largest expenditure the government has, while not chipping away at our debt at all, just paying the minimum amount. That's more than the feds will spend on healthcare this year. It's more than they'll spend on employment insurance or the child benefit. And while it's easy to get lost in a sea of big numbers, it's important to remember that even a deficit of $1 means we're not paying off our debt, but racking up more of it. And just like that credit card, it racks up more interest as we go. My takeaway? For a long time, governments knew they should at least aim for balance. Somehow they lost that notion. And one thing is for sure, if we don't care about living on borrowed money, they won't care either. That's Taking Stock for this week. I'm Amanda Lang. Thanks for being with us.